Good evening, everyone. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pulitzer Room. My name is Sheila Coronel. I'm the academic dean here at the Columbia Journalism School. Tonight, we will have the second of our 2 annual Hearst Digital Media Lectures. Every year, with the generous support of the Hearst Foundation, the school appoints the Hearst Digital Media Professional in Residence to participate in activities such as classes and programs, then deliver 2 digital media lectures. It provides a great opportunity for our students to interact with the professional in the field. In the past few years, we've been able, through this generous support from Hearst, we've been able to invite some of the top leaders in digital media to take up this residency. Past honorees have included Meredith Artley of CNN Digital, Mario Garcia of Garcia Media, Amanda Cox of the New York Times, Krishna Bharat, creator of Google News and now a member of our Board of Visitors, venture capitalist Ken Lehrer, Stephen Johnson, Brian Storm, Adrian Halavati, along with so many others. This year, we are very honored and happy to have the publisher of Vox Media, Melissa Bell, who's right here behind me. Melissa co-founded Vox in early 2014, so it's a 3-year-old company, and became the first person at Vox Media to hold both a technology and editorial title as Senior Product Manager and simultaneously Executive Editor for Vox.com. Melissa became publisher of Vox Media in 2016. Prior to Vox, she oversaw digital platforms at the Washington Post. She was also one of the Post's most read bloggers and a columnist for its style section. Before joining the Post, Melissa helped launch Mint, a Wall Street Journal subsidiary in India, where she lived for 4 years. She's been named one of the 100 most powerful women in Washington, wow, according to Washingtonian magazine, and of one of Marie Claire's 50 most connected women. Last fall, Melissa addressed our incoming class. This was last August. She talked about the changing media landscape and the place of this new generation of millennial journalists in it. Since August, things have changed quite a little bit. Tonight, she will talk about the conversations around cynicism, suspicion, partisanship, polarization in the media. Please welcome Melissa Bell.
Thank you. So a little bit of backstory on this. I just recently am recovering from a surgery. I got it 3 weeks ago, and I just was allowed to get off my crutches. So this is the first time that I'm walking in a bit of time. I'm very happy and pleased to be healing, so it's on the mend. But I am potentially going to be sitting down for part of the lecture, and hopefully I will be not quite as energetic as I usually am because of the injury. So that's just the backstory. Thank you so much for having me here. I really am excited to be honored with the position of this professorship and the offering these lectures. Last time I spoke, it was primarily to the students, so it's really fun to be here with during the reunion weekend. It's a different experience altogether, but it's going to be hopefully a great discussion. I wanted to talk tonight for a little bit of time, but I much prefer conversation. So I'm going to keep this short and sweet, and then hopefully we can open up for questions and have some good discussion around what I'm going to talk about, or anything you want to talk about, really. So to begin with, I would like you to picture a dog in your mind. I want you to picture a cute cartoon dog. I want you to picture a dog that has a fedora hat on its head. I want you to picture the dog with big googly eyes, and he's sitting at a kitchen table, and he is about to drink a cup of coffee, and he is surrounded by fire. If you don't have an image in your mind right now of the dog that I am thinking of, then I don't know if you were on the internet in 2016. But this Casey Green comic became a very popular meme on the internet in the last year. We used it to talk about the rising refugee crisis in Europe. The GOP used it to talk about the Democratic National Convention. The Democratic Party used it to talk about the Republican Party. In it, the dog is surrounded by fire, and he says, "This is fine." Tonight, I'd like you to keep that dog in mind while I talk about the media industry. All too often, I think, especially lately, we've been very proud of ourselves. We know that there's problems, but too often I think of us as the dog. We are the dog is us. We think things are fine, maybe they're getting a little bit better, maybe there's some hope on the horizon, and yet I want to stand here and say, things are not fine. Things are scary. There's fire encroaching on us on all sides, and we need to be more serious about the threats bearing down upon our business. If you think about it, the new presidential administration entered the presidency calling the media the opposition party. There's a rising tide of fake news purveyors in Europe and in the US. We saw earnest news organizations this year debating whether or not they could call a lie a lie. We are not just dealing with the transition from one medium to a new medium, as we were when we were transitioning from print and television to the digital web. We are now contending with a veritable 3D chessboard of AMPs and instant articles and Apple News and Amazon Echoes and VR headsets, Facebook Live videos. We are suddenly surrounded by multiple platforms distributing our stories in multiple formats. And we need an expertise in every single one of them, it seems, every single day. And yet we are very limited in our expertise, particularly because we don't quite know how to pay for it all. Sure, we've seen a bit of an uptick in subscriptions in the past few months, but those hardly are able to pay for the ambitious journalism that we hope to do in the media industry. We are seeing online digital advertising split between Facebook and Google, and what is left is often caught up in contention amongst advertising agencies not wanting to adapt to new standards, to fraudulent ad exchanges, to ad blockers. As I said, things are not fine. On top of all of that, tech companies are building the publishing platforms that we probably should have built a number of years ago. And they are doing it often without consulting us. They are doing it to serve instant gratification and shares and likes oftentimes trading that for serious inquiry and discussion. And I think, worst of all, what troubles me the most and what scares me the most and what feels the hottest as I sit there as a dog surrounded by flames, I think about something that I'm going to butcher Sally Fields' quote and say, people do not trust us. They really, really do not trust us. On top of that, studies are showing that people are starting to actively avoid the news. And they're doing it not only because they don't trust us, but because they are finding the news too depressing. Our product, instead of enlightening and enriching people and informing them, is depressing them and turning them away. So, this is a fun discussion, isn't it? This is all to say that things are not fine. And this is not something that happened overnight. In 1974, I believe, I'm going to check my notes to make sure that I have that right. Yes, the Pew Research studies started to ask the U.S. population whether they felt confident in the media industry and whether they were fairly and accurately reporting the news. At the time, Watergate had recently happened, and people felt very good about the media industry. 74% of the population felt we were doing our jobs well. Last year, 32% of the population thinks that we've been doing a good job. If you divide it on age lines, under 49-year-olds, only 23% of the population thinks we're doing a good job. If you divide it on partisan lines, only, I believe, let me just make sure this is correct, 14% of Republicans think the media is doing a good job. We are stretched thin as an industry. We're walking on a razor's edge with major threats to our business. Local news is decimated. The fact is most news organizations are not the size that they were a few years ago. New entrants to the field are not quite at the scale as old entrants were. And I will only talk a bit right now about the shouty state of television news and my concerns with that. On top of that, the work we are called to do is physically and emotionally exhausting. So what do? Do we sit back and enjoy the coffee? I really believe that you should always enjoy your coffee. Enjoy it right now. But I don't think we should just be drinking the coffee. I think that we need to actually be getting very angry. About 6 months ago, shortly after I spoke at this university, I fell into a bit of a strange state of anger and a bit of fear. I felt personally as if I had failed. I'm very proud of the company that we have built over the last 3 years. We started this company to bring explanatory journalism to the forefront of the conversation, to say that we could provide space online to provide a bit more context and contextual information to readers. And we've done a great job. The team there is succeeding in many, many ways. Vox has grown from a team of 10 people to over 100 people. We are producing videos and podcasts and text articles and conferences and events. We are seeing audiences read us, watch us, and listen to us over 175 million times a month. I should be very proud of that success, but a few months ago, I felt very angry at myself. I felt like I had failed, and the reason why was because 3 years ago, I could tell that the news was broken. I knew that there was problems with our industry. I knew there was revenue problems. I knew that there was technology problems. I knew there was a brokenness in our Discord, and I had not succeeded at fixing those problems. I maybe was a little naive to think that I could fix 4 decades of decline in trust in 3 years, but I was frustrated. And I was not just frustrated at myself, I was frustrated at our entire industry. I was frustrated that we were not moving fast enough, that we were not seeing this threat to our business and taking it more seriously. Once I moved past the anger, I realized that there are signs of hope out there. There are small signs, but they are out there nonetheless. We are producing quality work, not just at Vox Media, but across the industry. We are having a national conversation about the purpose and role of media and democracy for the first time in years. We are seeing platforms and audiences actually want and demand quality storytelling, quality journalism. Facebook is launching the Facebook Journalism Project, asking to figure out how to rebuild their platform with an eye for understanding that their audiences want to engage with quality work. Google is involved in some of the same investigations. We're starting to see subscriptions go up a bit. We're starting to see the fraudulent ad exchanges actually come under fire. There are small signs of hope here. So that makes me excited. It makes me hopeful. It makes me want to work hard. It makes me want to understand that there's more than just 3 years of work that has to go into this. We need a few more years ahead of us to really think through what we can do. Excuse me. Walking is hard work. Excuse me while I catch my breath. I'd like to talk a little bit about what I think we can do. Some of the things that we should be thinking about as we face a very frightening world around us. For starters, I think that we need to pay attention to our audience beyond just points on the ComScore scorecards. We want to treat our audiences not as cynical, combative trolls, but as curious people. I believe that people are trying very hard to figure out a very complicated world around them, and we have set up systems to confuse them, to spread misinformation. We have not thought about changing our products to serve as guides. We need to rethink the concepts of conversation and community. Vox Media was founded 10 years ago as a sports site to help connect bloggers who wanted to provide a better space for community amongst themselves. You're starting to see this happen more often, where we thought originally the internet was going to be a great space for large groups of national dialogue. turns out it is very hard to have everyone in the room shouting at each other at any one time. One thing that I really do believe that we're doing well at Vox Media is thinking about creating deep spaces of engagement. How do we take those moments of very difficult conversation, whether it's about sports and the team that you love, or about a topic like abortion, and create a space smaller and more dedicated and safer for people online? How do we do that with our journalism? How do we do that with our platforms? How do we do that with our product? Another thing that I really believe that we need to think about is stop blaming our audiences for not reading us, for not treating the news as part of their civic duty. I think that we look to them, sometimes we look at them in a condescending way and think, we're doing all of this great work, why aren't they coming to us? And yet we're presenting information to them in a way that we've presented information for past technologies, for past experiences. We need to think about using some of the lessons and the techniques of the internet, lessons and techniques of the entertainment world, and think about how we can create a more engaging product for our users. At Vox Media, this is something that we are very much engaged in. It's not that people don't want to read hard news. It's not that people don't want to know and understand difficult topics. It's that we need to change the way that we approach it. Recently, we had a video at Vox Media at vox.com that was viewed over 100 million times. And that video was a 7-minute explainer on Syria. It was about the geopolitical forces behind the conflict. It was actually 2 years old at the time that we recently republished it. Because unfortunately, the forces that have gotten us to where we are today in Syria have not changed much in the last 2 years. The context that we can bring in that video is information people really want to know. They really want to understand it. They're not just looking for entertainment anymore. They're looking for that deep information. But we presented it in a way that was an animated explainer, that was engaging, that was interesting, that was conversational. We thought about how do we change and attract people to the news so they're not immediately walking into it and being like, I don't want to read another story about Syria. We also need to stop thinking about the emotional impact of the never-ending news cycle. It is incredibly hard when people are inundated every single day with horrible, horrible topics. We see now, we have all of this technology at the tips of our fingers. We can do incredible 360-degree videos of terror attacks that bring you right into the place, that put you in the position of fear and anxiety just as much if you're in San Diego, or you're in Texas, or you're in India. What is the impact that's having on our audience? What is that anxiety, that feeling of constant fear? I think about this when I watch television, and on 24-hour news channels, how often breaking news is down at the lower third of the TV screen? How often is the news actually breaking that immediately that you need to have all caps yelling at you from your television screen? So what can we do about that? What do we do about treating our audience with a bit of calm, a bit of context to say, hey, something really tragic just happened, but let me put this into context. We talk about this often at Vox when we cover major terrorist attacks. So often what isn't provided to people is the fact that terrorism is not the leading killer in the US. Gun deaths are. And when you talk about gun deaths, it's not actually gun deaths of violence committed against other people. It's oftentimes the gun violence that people inflict upon themselves with suicide. So there's layers of stories that we're not providing to people. We're not getting to the root of the problem, and we're also not letting people stop for a moment, take a deep breath around big, scary topics, and start to get to the root of really what's available, so they don't just see constant breaking news all of the time. Another thing that I really think that we need to start to think about is stop treating our audiences as if they don't understand the definition of objectivity. We once had a monopoly on information and the distribution methods for that information. And I think that this was a wonderful time, probably, to be a news broadcaster when there was only 3 channels out there. But I think that it led us to become a bit too sanctimonious in our reports. We became truth holders instead of truth seekers. And we praised this idea of objectivity too often, when really people started to understand that editorial judgment was really just a code for, this is what I think is important. And I think that if you ask most people of color who had to read a report largely written by white people, they will tell you that this was a hollow idea throughout time. But we continued to cling to this notion of a biasless report, and we left the door wide open for someone like Roger Ailes to stride in and create the Fox News channel, which presented to everyone that they are the fair and balanced choice, because half of the country does not believe the other half of the media industry is fair and balanced. So we know that. What do we have to do when we look at ourselves and start to admit our biases? How do we start to build news products that actually make us show our work, that show our evidence, that treat our efforts as building long-term relationships with our audience, rather than just blindly telling people to trust us in one-off visits? How do we constantly ask ourselves what holes we have in our coverage? If we talk about what topics we're choosing, why we chose them, how we came to that decision. We also need to get to know our audience. We need to let them to get to know us. One of our brands at Vox Media, we have 8 different brands there, is Recode, our business of technology brand. It's run by Kara Swisher, one of the best technology reporters out there today. Something that Kara has asked everyone to do is to write a personal statement of ethics on their site. So if you go to any Recode story, you can click on the byline and you can see that person's personal ethics. Kara Swisher reports that she was previously married to a woman who worked at Google and worked in the Obama administration. She wants and trusts her audience to understand her background, where she's coming from, so that she can start the relationship with them immediately saying, this is my story, and now I'm going to tell you my story, and I'm going to deliver the best. She's being honest with them, and she's expecting the same respect back. The other thing that I really believe we need to think about in the media is competing over diminishing returns. One of the things that is very true about every journalist is there is a deep love of competition. We like to compete over the latest scoops. We like to compete over who can get the better story out there. But what we've seen is a tendency to create almost lemming-like behavior, where news breaks and everyone rushes to that story, completely ignoring the stories uncovered with our slim resources. And then another news story breaks and everyone runs there. You saw that with the Flint, Michigan crisis and with the water crisis recently, when more reporters were on the ground than residents in Flint for a certain period of time. And while the lead crisis was a terrible, terrible experience for Flint, there was lead crises happening in Pittsburgh, in California, in Washington, D.C. We did not talk about those crises for months because everyone was busy in Flint. So we need to think about how we're doing this better as an industry. How do we amplify each other's work so we can focus on other stories ourselves? We also have to understand that we are not competing against other media organizations anymore. We are facing threats to our business. We are facing threats to the distribution channels. And we need to think about how we can start to come to decisions about how we think news should be presented and distributed, and offer that to other organizations. I look at this with something that I'm most proud of at Vox Media. For the last 4 years, we've been working on a better ad technology product. We realized that the ad technology that was out there, that was offered up, was not going to create a real sustainable business model for journalism. It was going to create a system that promotes fake news, that promotes fake news science stories, that promises you how to lose your belly fat in 3 weeks. And we set out to create a better ad technology that created premium advertising just as much as we wanted to create premium storytelling. But we didn't do this alone. We partnered with NBC and Condé Nast, and we're creating a system of almost an open source ad technology platform to figure out how we can bring a better experience for our users. You're also seeing this with open source technology projects like the Google AMP project, or courts opening up their chart tool. It's as simple as trying to finally see that we have so many problems out there, and that instead of fighting over solving a few, we need to partner together to solve all of them. I cannot believe how out of breath I am. I'm so sorry about this. Finally, of course, I believe more than ever, we have to be seized by a sense of purpose. This is the most incredible job, the most incredible industry I could ever ask to be a part of. I love the fact that I have the honor to tell other people's stories, that I get to go out and ask questions and be nosy and be curious about the world around me. And yet, sometimes I think we throw up our hands, frustrated with all of the change around us. We grow angry, as I did, that things are not changing fast enough. And yet, we need to remember why we're doing this, what made us want to participate in this industry in the first place. It's something that is solving a problem for people. It is actually going out to them and saying, what do you need to know, and how can I help deliver that? We challenge all of our 8 brands at Vox Media to think of themselves as services first. What is the service they're providing to their readers or to their viewers or to their listeners? What is the problem that they are trying to solve to people? How do they create guides for news, guides for restaurants, guides for video games? We ask them to think about it as a task that they need to do in every single story choice and every single new investment that they're making. What is the problem that they're trying to solve? Phone break. Uh, so I promise I won't go on for very much longer. We need to push ourselves to go deep, to matter, and to make a difference every single day. We have lost the trust of our readers and our audience members because we have not opened ourselves up to the reality that maybe we don't have all of the answers. I have a lot of questions still. I know that this is not going to be easily solved. But I think the more we have this conversation, the more stark we look at ourselves and say we haven't been doing a good job, I think we'll be able to go forward and do a much better one in the future. So thank you very much. And if you guys have any questions, I'd love to talk about them now.
Hi, thank you for your talk. As an editor, I'm curious to ask you, what steps are you taking, if any, to reach out to the 80% Republicans that don't trust you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it starts, there's many different ways that you can do this. I think it starts with building out the story choices and the people that you are actually hiring to be reporters. We've done this before we started, before the election, but particularly now, we're looking very hard to find conservative writers, conservative talkers, who want to cover the stories that is interesting to them. It starts with the interest, I think, of the reporter. What drives your passion? What drives your interest? And how do we get those people engaged in conversations on our platforms, just as much as all of the other writers that work with us? And I believe that is one way that we can start to have engaged dialogue. Another way, I think, is very much in thinking about smaller community sizes. One of the things we have at Vox is a podcast called The Weeds. It is led by Matt Iglesias, Ezra Klein, and Sarah Cliff. Matt and Ezra have a very long history of writing from a more progressive background, but they've created a small online Facebook community for their audiences. And in that community, they have a number of people who've joined the community from conservative backgrounds. And you can see, because it's a group of about 2,000 people, they're able to have really engaged dialogues that Ezra and Matt participate in, and Sarah participates in as well, around topics. Where the other day, a man sat there and asked about, that he came out and he said that he was pro-life, and he wanted to have a discussion around what that meant to him and what that meant to other people. And you could see 200 comments building out. And the comments were not the comments that are just open to everyone. It's an actual engaged dialogue. There's a moderated experience there. Those kind of guided experiences, I think, are ways that we can start to really engage with one another.
So, in the contemporary world of journalism, people are having to be reporting like on every platform all day long. So how do these people not get burned out? You're just talking about exhausting. And when you look at someone who comes on, they do that for a certain amount of time. When we know from people who are very successful early bloggers that they just had to stop. So it's very hard for me to sort of envision how you can be a successful journalist under those terms and have a long-term career.
Yeah, I think part of it is the time period that we went through. I think that we had to adjust our own expectations of how it is to live our lives online. And we're not through that period of creation. I think that's why we're still struggling to understand what the news product of today is. But I think that we're getting to a period where we're starting to self-regulate. We're starting to understand that you can't be online all the time. There's still struggles with it. I'm not saying that we have the solutions to it. But one of the things that we do at Vox is actually choose and say no to certain platforms and say we're only going to have Racked, which is our fashion brand, on Facebook and newsletters, and that's it. We're not going to ask them to be on anything else. We can program that, make it run automatically on Twitter, run automatically on Instagram. Everything else, their focus is just two. Vox has a lot more platforms because they have a lot more people that they're pushing things out to. And we start to do it with people as well. We start to say, you know what, you're a reporter, you should maybe only focus on the platforms that you care about. Again, I think a lot of it has to stem from the interest of the reporter. Some reporters love Twitter. Some reporters hate Twitter. That's okay. Some reporters need to be on Facebook. I think that we made a mistake in the beginning, thinking that in the beginning of sort of the digital transition, that you were going to do all things at all times to all people. And that's just not the way anyone can live. And that's not the way our users live. We see that there's people who love YouTube and only want to go to YouTube. There's some people who only love Snapchat. There's some people who only love podcasts. So I think we're getting better, but I think it's a question of focus. I think you can't do everything.
So you're also talking about people not reading or, paying attention to the news. And I do feel like there are so many, I think you make an excellent point that there is no purpose in the current economic climate for journalism in 50 people telling the same story in the same place. And especially a story that should be a long-term story and now is going to end up being forgotten. 2 years from now, what will we be hearing about Flint? But I also think that there are many stories that would make people feel more hopeful, just aren't getting done because everyone's, so alarmed about so many things. So I do think some energy has to be devoted to, like, the wonderful story out of medicine or the wonderful story out of science, because honestly, people are human beings and there's only so much alarmism and horror that they can handle.
Yeah, I agree. I think another thing that we think about a lot is thinking about changing the way that we think of news stories. When I was a print reporter, I loved filing my story. It was done. I had a lot of edits, and then I could feel like that's it. I'm done. I'm finished. I'm never going to look at that story again. Now the information doesn't go away online. You can put the entire text of Moby Dick online and it will stay there until the servers stop running. And so we need to think about how do we change our news product for that. At Vox, some of the things that we do is like create explainers that exist over time. Things don't change. The Syria conflict was still started because of for the same reasons. 2 years ago, 5 years ago, the same forces got us to that same place. I think this about Obamacare, the history of Obamacare, how the 100 years that took us to the creation of Obamacare, we can put that into one bucket of information and then help serve it up. So I think there's a lot of repetitive work that we continue to do because we think of our product as a single experience, and we need to start thinking of our products as connected.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You've mentioned a little bit about the open source ad and fake ad problem. Could you talk a little bit about the money stream here when you start saying, okay, we're going to make only Facebook a channel and here, sort of a deep channel? The question is, how does this actually fund the journalism? Could we learn more about this in the new environment?
Sure. So obviously I think the last count, there's 76 different revenue streams for digital properties I think David Plotz put this on. I believe it was him. I I might be wrong about that. But he wrote on Slate about 76 different revenue opportunities for news organizations today. And that's everything from subscriptions to donations to branded content to display advertising, et cetera, et cetera. So there are ways to make money as a journalist. There's ways to make money as a journalism organization. But the returns are not very big. The New York Times is not supporting their incredible foreign staff through their digital revenue. And that's even with a subscription bump. So I think that there's two things that we did wrong when we moved on. Well, there's a number of things we did wrong. One is that we didn't put up subscriptions. We didn't treat our content as something that was valuable in that way. We also didn't think about creating an ad technology that matched the editorial technology. We did a lot of innovation in the editorial space. We thought a lot about how to tell better stories online. We invested a lot in snowfall experiences, and we never thought to make beautiful ads online. We stuck with the banner ad for a very long time. So we need to spend a lot of time thinking about the ad experience, not just for the mobile web experience, but also for new platforms like Facebook and Snapchat. We have to work with those platform companies to understand what is the best way to deliver ads on their sites and create revenue streams on their sites. What's exciting to me is they see that now. They're very engaged in trying to help figure out revenue streams for journalists in a way that they weren't 2 or 3 years ago. But they see the business value of quality work, and there's an audience demand for quality work. It's a great time for us because this is a good evolution for the internet, and it makes me very excited, but we don't have all the answers yet.
Hi, thanks for coming. I'm just a student here, so I'll just ask questions from like somebody who consumes the news. So the first question is, sometimes I feel that serious journalism is just very hard to advertise along. Like, for example, the Syria crisis, like what kind of brands wants to be associated with that?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we what are your thoughts on how to monetize serious journalism?
Well, if you go back to newspaper days, which I once came from, the serious journalism was paid for because a lot of people wanted to read the sports news, and they like to do crossword puzzles, and they wanted to read the classified ads. There's always been a support in the bundle. You've always seen that perhaps your highest paying thing is not going to be the investigative work, but it's probably going to be the most expensive. So how do you balance that with the other work that you're doing? So one thing is we need to rethink what our bundle is online today. At Vox Media, we have 8 different media properties. We have sports, we have fashion, we have food, we have news. So that's one thing that I think about. The other thing is that there are other ways that are not just advertising to support hard news, subscriptions, events. There's actual IP that you can turn the stories into. So I think that those are the pathways that we look down to make sure that we're supporting the hard work that we can create.
Thank you. So second question.
Yeah.
After the election cycle in 2016, I think a lot of journalism brands, including the New York Times, have started doing basically a branding campaign to show that journalism is actually valuable in this society. I wonder, can you comment on whether you think those are effective in reaching to new audiences, stuff like that?
If their mottos are effective, or just the campaigns in general?
Like the branding campaigns.
The branding campaigns. So I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I keep thinking somebody who turned the Washington Post "Democracy Dies in Darkness" into a goth campaign. So I always think of that. I mean, to me, it's again it's one of the signs of hope that I see. The New York Times and the Washington Post. I think newspapers had it a little bit tougher, and television channels had it a little bit tougher than magazines in this transitional time. Magazines had to know who they were and knew what purpose they served. And on top of that, readers identified with them for being I'm a New Yorker reader. I'm a Dwell reader. I read The Economist. They presented those magazines on their living room tables to sort of show some identification with it. Newspapers and television had monopolies on geography, in terms of geography and time space. And so they didn't have to be individualized. They didn't have to show that there was a service other than the fact that they delivered the news to you every single morning. So I think that it's great that the New York Times is trying to show what they offer and trying to explain themselves to audiences more than just, you got to read me. I'm the New York Times. And so I like that this is something that they're really thinking about, and they're engaging with their audience, trying to explain what their goal is and what their purpose is.
Thank you.
So I'm still thinking about what you said about the journalist who you admitted that like her partner or her like involvement in a campaign or
Harris
something.
Fisher, yes.
What? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I like for the record, I just want to say like I really miss like journalists' anonymity of just like being a byline. It made me think when you said that about Jorge Ramos's daughter being involved in I guess it was it the Clinton or the Obama campaign? And like I don't know if he put that like always in his bio. Like was there, how is that working out? I mean, there's like so many comments. Like does that come back to bite her ever, or do people trust her more?
I think people trust her more because
Are they
I
just
think they
picking
know
on her all the time?
you know, people pick on her. The internet is a rough place. I mean, I think that it is very difficult to be anonymous in this day and age. As a person, as a reporter, there is a lot of information out there. I don't know if you guys saw this news story, but there's like smart TVs that are like tracking our conversations now. I mean, like there's like just a lot of information out there that is like being tracked. It is hard. You see this in the election with email leaks. There are very few private spaces anymore. People can pull out that information and connect conspiracy theories in ways that seem illogical to hopefully you and I, but when they think of it as a conspiracy, that they're uncovering some sort of truth, that to me feels more dangerous. So I think what Kara does is she says, here's all of my business. It is not important to my work, but you can know about it. And then if you have questions, ask me. And she engages with conversation on Twitter all day long with readers.
Okay, is that like considered a qualification, those things that she's put out there too?
On Recode, all of the reporters write their own personal statement of ethics. It's one of the things that they want the Recode reporters to do. It's very soothing.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Would you talk about your audience for Vox News? In particular, what is or who is your target audience? What are you doing to capture that audience? And how successful have you been at capturing that audience?
I think I have a different idea of what my audience is at Vox, but I have a very specific target in mind. My sister is a school teacher. She teaches art for K through 8th graders. She is a brilliant, wonderful, lovely woman who is busy all day long. And she comes home and she will hear something on NPR or she will see something on the news. And then she will call me up and she will be like, do you know that like this crazy thing is happening and I don't really know what's going on, and tell me what's going on. And she wants to participate in the conversations that are happening around her. She wants to understand what is shaping the world. And so often she comes home and she is just a very busy person who has no idea what's happening in the news. And so I think about her in terms of like, what is the problem I'm trying to solve for her?
And how old is she?
I'm sorry?
How old is she? How old is she?
She, well, I don't know if I can say that. No, I'm just kidding. She's, I actually don't even know. She's 40? But I think that, you know, the idea of her as a busy person who is a smart, engaged, curious person, that is what I think of as our target audience. And I think that it can be any age range. You know, it's always lovely to be able to say our Snapchat users are 14 and they're the future, and this is very exciting. But I want to be solving the problem for 14 to 84. And so the reason why I'm sort of like hedging around this is because we have different audience targets for different platforms. So Snapchat has a very young audience. We want to make sure that we're engaging them, a young audience that's consistent, and we want them to come back, and then we want them to subscribe to us. So on Snapchat, we're doing well. It's a little tricky. The data's a little hard to fully understand there, but it feels exciting and interesting there. On YouTube, we have a very male-dominated audience on YouTube. I would love for us to have more women watchers on YouTube. On Facebook, we have many more female audiences. I think we are doing a good job of reaching audiences. I think we are seeing a return visits and a faster rate of return. But I still would like to serve more people, and I would like to reach more people. So I don't feel like a success yet.
And I assume that more and more and more of your audience is coming to you
Yes.
on mobile.
Yes, actually, a huge new audience for us is Apple News. Apple has put us, this is another sign that platforms are really wanting to engage with quality work. If you swipe left on your phone, you see stories, 4 stories in this Apple News box. And we're seeing a huge amount of readers come through that nowadays. And they're actually more older through Apple News. That is a very interesting space for us that we are inserted onto the front screen of your phone every single day.
I don't want to take up too much more time.
Yeah.
I have one thing that I think you might like to hear. I teach multimedia journalism at Boston University, and one of the assignments I give is to track a variety of news websites and whatever else they might do, especially online. And Vox was among those assigned this semester.
Good.
And the student, Ryan Furlong, just published his summary, and this is what he said. News can be really complicated, and if you aren't consistently keeping up on current events, it might be hard to follow the news. This is where Vox steps up. They put in a lot of effort to break down stories into easy-to-follow anecdotes along with links to stories that relate to one another. Explaining the news is only true, well, I think he means that you do it better than others. And I think this is something that truly helps encompass the true purpose of Vox News.
Oh, thank you very much. Give him an A.
As someone whose experience with newspapers goes back to the days of the linotype, I did, while I have had experience with daily newspapers, the Baltimore Sun and others, I have been mostly concerned with weeklies. I started a weekly in 1975 and then added some other weeklies to it. This was in Delaware. I wonder if you've considered at all where the local newspaper, the paper that prints the graduates from high school and so forth, where that newspaper area stands in the developing news business.
Yeah. I think that that's an area of massive concern for me. 3 of our properties at Vox Media are actually local, Curbed, Eater, and SB Nation, where we cover sports, real estate and architecture, and food and dining on a local level. And they're very successful at that local level. What is not covered is potentially the high school sports scores and the investigation into City Hall. My not so secret dream is that I would love to have Vox Memphis and Vox Austin and all of that across the board. I think that investing in local journalism is something that we really need to make up for, and we have not seen that happen. A lot of the success for new digital news brands are at the national level, and oftentimes they move international before they do move local. But that's not to say that there's not some strong signs happening. There's a company called the New Tropic, which is a Miami-based local news organization. The Texas Tribune in Austin is doing fantastic work. Voice of San Diego is in my hometown. They have a team of, I think, 6 people, and they're doing some really deep, smart investigative work of the San Diego City Hall. You're starting to see more of these local papers happen around the country. And so even though it's not as dramatic or as clear of an answer as we have found in some of the national levels, I do have hope for it.
That's good to hear.
Thank you.
Hope.
Hi, Melissa. So my question is about the Syria video that went viral, and 2 questions about it. One is, so it was 2 years after you had originally produced that video. So what did you do to get it in circulation again? And secondly, were you able to monetize that?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to talk about a different story first. Pearls Before Breakfast was written by, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to do this. He's a brilliant Washington Post reporter, Gene. Somebody has to know him. I can't believe I'm not. Thank you. Thank you. God, I'm so sorry. He's one of my favorite writers. He wrote an amazing article about a violinist who went into the Washington Metro and played his violin for an hour. And as subway passers walked back and forth, I highly recommend it. You should all go read it. When I was at the Washington Post, every so often we would see suddenly that was the #1 story on our site. And it had been written 7 years before. And it was with regularity that the story would suddenly get sort of catch on fire on Facebook. Somebody would discover it for the first time, and it would tell them the stories of how terrible we all are, and we don't understand art, and we're all just too busy to like pause and appreciate art. And I loved that so much. I loved that story of this beautiful piece coming back to life. And it didn't change. You know, we still do walk through subways too fast. And so I've always played with this idea of, can we pull things from the archives and republish them? And it's as simple as putting them on Facebook. It's as simple as putting them in a tweet. It just takes a little bit to push them. If it's a good story and if it's good content, it doesn't matter when it was published. I did this with, the Washington Post. God, I miss their archives. They go back 130 years, and you can find just incredible pieces in there. The Washington Post reviewed the Rolling Stone and just butchered them in the 1963 review. Just completely hated Mick Jagger. And like, that story is amazing to read today. And so I really believe that archives, even if they're 2 years old, if it's a good story, we do something where we update our stories though. So the Syrian video, we actually updated it with 2 more minutes of content, because there was more context that we could add to it in the past 2 years. And we wanted to bring it up to date. So we did add to the original 5 minutes. And we do this with our stories as well. If you see on our site, it doesn't say published on, it says updated on for all of our articles. One thing that I'd love to think about, Wikipedia is the encyclopedia site, and they have this great revision history. I would love to see that for some news stories. And you see people doing that already. They create these screen grabs and Wayback Time Machine and then compare how news stories progress. So I'd love for us to think about doing things like that. So I don't know if that answered your question. Sorry, I got lost.
The second part was how you were able to, were you able to monetize
Yes.
that
Yeah.
Syria video when it went viral?
So with our business model, we have a variety of ways. So it's very difficult to say that single video made this much money for us, but we monetize our videos on YouTube through pre-roll. We monetize them on Facebook through a variety of different sponsorships, and now we're playing with this mid-roll ad. We also obviously have a display advertising business on our site, so that video appeared on our site and was viewed on our site as well. We have advertising businesses through other platforms as well, so it was partly monetized through the regular run of our display advertising. You're welcome.
This is a little high.
Hi.
Hi, Melissa. Hi. I wondered what you thought of branded content. In one respect, it's definitely a revenue stream for like the Times and the Washington Post, but on the other hand, a lot of reporters look at it as like kind of mushing up the story and not really, it's sponsors telling it. This story might be fun and interesting, but how do you tell that someone's sponsoring it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is really where I would love us to be smarter as an industry about helping people understand where a story comes from and what the background is. Branded content is a specific revenue stream that publishers are using, but what it comes down to is that anyone can be a publisher today. And they can be a publisher if they are Red Bull. They can be a publisher if they are my little brother. They can be a publisher. It doesn't matter. You have the same tools as everyone else does. This is really what we're seeing with the so-called like fake news crisis, is that people were just publishing whatever they wanted to, and it looked like an article. And the reason why we've allowed that to happen is because we haven't thought about a product that helps people understand where that article comes from, or what the background to the reporting is, or how they arrived at the decisions that they arrive at in the article. Even showing something as basic as a reporter's bio is a way for people to understand the system that they sit within. So I don't think branded content is the problem. I think that it is, in fact, if it's done well, it's a really great way for advertising brands to tell their own story. What is the problem is that we don't have cues anymore to help readers discern where a story comes from. This is something we think about a lot. We have a branded content business at Vox Media, and so we're constantly thinking about what's the way that we're showing one version, the language around it and the presentation of it, and how do we make sure that people understand what they're getting when they get there. And one sign that we just saw was we put up a Spotify video recently on our Facebook page, and it was branded content. It was created in partnership with Spotify. And it was done in a style of a video animated explainer, but we made very clear in the language what it was. And our audience appreciated that. They were like, this is the best video. Like, it's so interesting to hear this from Spotify's point of view. We know it's an ad that's really like, who cares? It's a cool video, like, like blah, blah, blah. And I'd want the audience to understand what they're seeing and still love it and still be excited about it. That to me is a win. Are we watching the Spotify video? One more. We gotta wrap up. We're wrapping up. Oh, you can ask me afterwards. What's my day like? Exhausting. No. My day, it's very busy. We have an 800-person company, and it's a big company now, and it's kind of crazy and chaotic, and we're trying to figure out platforms and advertising and storytelling and all of that insanity. I did go through a period, last fall where I was like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job. Right now, I feel like we're doing a job that matters. We're doing a job that's incredibly important. I feel super fired up about it. I am thrilled that I get to do this job. I feel incredibly privileged that I get to do this job. So my days right now are pretty fun. It feels good to have a purpose. I'm not gonna lie. So thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you. You did a good job in this presentation, so we're all very grateful. Please join us downstairs. We have a reception for all our alumni at the Brown Institute in the lobby. Thank you so much for attending this talk, and we'll see you downstairs, and we can continue this conversation with Melissa. That was great. You started out, depressing, but, kind of